My friends, life is a journey filled with seasons of change, moments of joy, and times of heartache. Along the way, we encounter people who shape our lives, some for good and others for harm. But I want to tell you today that when God removes someone from your life, it is not a loss, it is divine protection. He sees what we cannot see. He knows the heart of man, and He understands who belongs in our lives and who does not. Many times we hold on to relationships that are draining us spiritually, emotionally, and even physically. We invest time in people who are leading us away from God rather than drawing us closer to Him. Yet in His mercy, God intervenes. He closes doors. He ends friendships. He removes influences that threaten to derail our purpose. It may be painful, but it is necessary. We must trust that when God allows someone to walk away, He has a reason. Perhaps they were hindering our faith. Maybe they were a stumbling block to our destiny. Sometimes their season in our lives has simply come to an end. And rather than questioning God's decisions, we must surrender to His will, knowing that His plans are always for our good. The Bible tells us that bad company corrupts good character. How many of us have seen our faith weaken because of the people we surround ourselves with? How many of us have felt the tug of compromise, the pressure to conform, the temptation to stray from God's path? But the Lord, in His infinite wisdom, steps in. He orchestrates circumstances that reveal the true nature of those around us. He exposes deceit, removes distractions, and aligns us with those who will strengthen our walk with Him. When God removes the wrong people, it is not a sign of rejection, but a sign of direction. He is making room for better. He is preparing the way for divine connections, for friendships that will uplift rather than tear down, for relationships that will bring joy instead of sorrow. We must let go of what He is pruning so that we may receive the greater blessings He has in store. Do not fight to keep what God is trying to remove. Do not hold on to toxic relationships out of fear or loneliness. The same God who takes away is the God who restores. The same God who removes is the God who blesses. Trust His plan, walk in obedience, and know that when He clears the path, it is always to lead you into a greater season of purpose, peace, and divine favor. There are moments in life when people leave us, and we don't understand why. A friend turns their back on us. A relationship falls apart. A person we once trusted betrays us. And in our limited understanding, we question, we grieve, and we wonder what we did wrong. But what we must realize is that God is always at work, even when we don't see it. He is moving behind the scenes, orchestrating His plan, and sometimes that plan requires the removal of people who are not meant to stay. We see the surface, but God sees the heart. We hear the words people say, but God knows their intentions. We observe their actions, but God knows what they do when no one is watching. And because He is a loving Father, because He is a protector of His children, He will remove those who mean us harm before we ever realize the danger. Some people smile in our presence, but carry jealousy in their hearts. Some people walk with us, but have no intention of going where God is leading us. Some people claim to love us, but in time their true nature is revealed. And rather than letting us walk blindly into heartache, God, in His wisdom, intervenes. There are times when we pray for success, for open doors, for blessings beyond measure, and we don't understand why certain people start to drift away. But what we fail to see is that their presence in our lives would have hindered the very thing we were praying for. Some relationships are distractions disguised as friendships. Some people attach themselves to us not because they love us, but because they see what God is doing in our lives and want to benefit from it. And if we are not careful, we will spend our energy trying to hold on to people that God is pulling away. We must trust Him, even when it hurts, even when we feel abandoned, even when we do not understand. The very people we thought we needed may have been the ones holding us back. The very friendships we were trying to save may have been the ones leading us into places we were never meant to go. The very relationships we wanted to last may have been the very thing that would have delayed the purpose God has for us. God does not make mistakes. He does not take without the intention to give. He does not remove without the purpose of replacing. He does not close a door unless there is something greater on the other side. And when we trust Him, when we walk in faith rather than fear, when we surrender rather than resist, we will come to see that every loss was actually His loving hand at work, guiding us, protecting us, and preparing us for something far greater than we ever imagined. There are people who come into our lives, and for a season they seem like they will always be there. They walk with us, encourage us, and even help us grow. But then, suddenly, they leave. Sometimes the separation is peaceful, and other times it is painful. It may come in the form of betrayal, misunderstandings, or circumstances that pull you apart. And when that happens, we struggle to make sense of it. We ask why. We wonder what changed. We try to hold on, but no matter how hard we grasp, they slip away. But what we must understand is that not everyone is meant to stay. Some people are placed in our lives for a reason, for a lesson, for a moment of growth, but they are not meant to be part of the entire journey. There are friendships that were only meant for a season. There are relationships that served a purpose, but were never meant to last forever. There are people who enter our lives, impact us in a meaningful way, and then exit, not because we did something wrong, but because their time in our story has ended. We often confuse temporary connections with lifelong relationships. We assume that just because someone started with us, they must finish with us. But God's plan does not work that way. He places people in our path to guide us, to teach us, to challenge us, and sometimes to push us closer to Him. And when their role in our journey is complete, He moves them aside so we can continue growing. Holding on to the wrong people, even those who once meant well, can hinder our progress. There are times when we outgrow relationships, not out of pride or superiority, but because God is calling us to a higher place. There are people who cannot go where God is leading us. Their presence was needed for one chapter, but they are not part of the next. And if we refuse to let go, we may miss what God has ahead. Some people were meant to introduce us to something new, to prepare us for a season of transformation, to push us through a difficult moment, but they were never meant to walk with us forever. It is hard to accept, but God knows who belongs in our lives and who does not. He knows who will strengthen our faith and who will become a distraction. He knows who will bring joy and who will bring sorrow. And when He removes someone, it is always for our good. When people leave, it is not a sign of failure, but a sign of God's direction. He is shifting things, aligning us with those who will propel us forward, and making space for the right people to enter at the right time. Instead of clinging to what God is removing, we must learn to trust Him. If we fight against His plan, we risk delaying the blessings He has prepared. If we hold on to what was, we may miss what is to come. When someone walks away, it is not always a loss. It may be a divine transition. Their departure does not mean our journey is over. It means our story is moving forward, and God is preparing us for something far greater than we could ever imagine. There is power in the company we keep. The people around us influence how we think, how we act, and even how we grow in our faith. Some lift us up, challenge us, and push us closer to God. Others drain us, discourage us, and pull us away from His presence. Not all relationships are good for us, and not all friendships are meant to last. Some are toxic, not just emotionally, but spiritually. And if we are not careful, these relationships can weaken our faith, cloud our judgment, and take us further from the path God has set before us. Toxic relationships do not always appear harmful at first. They often start with good intentions, with kindness, with shared experiences. But over time, they begin to change us. They introduce doubt where there was once faith. They encourage compromise where there was once conviction. They lead us to justify things we once knew were wrong. And little by little, without even realizing it, we drift away from God. The Bible warns us that bad company corrupts good character. It is not just about avoiding obvious sin, but about guarding our hearts against influences that weaken our spiritual foundation. Toxic relationships can come in many forms. Some are filled with negativity and discouragement, constantly speaking doubt into our dreams and fear into our future. Some are filled with manipulation, guilt, and control, making us feel trapped in cycles of emotional and spiritual exhaustion. Others are marked by temptation, leading us into lifestyles and choices that pull us away from God's truth. When we surround ourselves with the wrong people, we become desensitized to the things that once convicted us. We begin to tolerate what we once rejected. We start excusing behaviors we once knew were destructive. Our passion for God fades, our hunger for righteousness diminishes, and we find ourselves walking in a direction we never intended to go. And the most dangerous part is that we often do not notice the change until we are far from where we started. God, in His love, does not want us to remain in relationships that are poisoning our spirit. He does not want us bound by connections that steal our peace, weaken our joy, or compromise our calling. That is why He will sometimes remove certain people from our lives, not as a punishment, but as protection. It may hurt at first, it may feel like a loss, but in time we will see that His hand was guiding us all along. We must have the courage to walk away from relationships that are leading us away from God. We must have the wisdom to recognize when someone is hindering our spiritual growth. And we must have the faith to trust that when God calls us to let go, He is making room for something better. When we choose to surround ourselves with people who encourage our faith, who uplift our spirit, and who remind us of God's promises, we will find strength, purpose, and a deeper relationship with the one who never leaves us nor forsakes us. Letting go is never easy. We become attached to people, to relationships, to familiar places and situations. Even when they no longer serve God's purpose in our lives, we hold on, sometimes out of love, sometimes out of fear, and other times because we simply do not understand why God is removing something or someone from our lives. But what we must realize is that letting go is not a loss. It is an act of trust. It is a surrender to the one who sees the full picture, the one who knows what is best for us even when we do not. There are times when God begins pruning our lives, cutting away the things that are hindering our growth, removing the people who are holding us back, stripping away distractions that are keeping us from walking in His purpose. And in our limited understanding, we resist. We fight to hold on to relationships that have run their course. We cling to friendships that are no longer healthy. We try to keep doors open that God Himself is shutting. But the more we resist, the more we struggle, and the heavier the burden becomes. Jesus said in John 15:02, every branch that bears fruit He prunes so that it may bear more fruit. Pruning is a process of cutting away the unnecessary so that something better can grow. It is painful, but it is necessary. And when God prunes our lives, He is not taking from us, He is preparing us. He is making room for something greater. He is removing what is no longer serving His plan so that we can step into the fullness of what He has in store. Letting go brings freedom. It releases us from the weight of relationships that drain us, from the chains of toxic connections, from the limitations of our own understanding. It allows us to walk unhindered into the next season God has prepared. When we surrender what we were never meant to carry, we find peace. When we release what is no longer meant for us, we discover joy. When we trust that God's pruning is for our good, we step into blessings we never could have imagined. But the enemy wants us to believe otherwise. He whispers lies that if we let go, we will be alone. That if we release what is familiar, we will be left with nothing. That if we stop holding on, we will regret it. But the truth is, we cannot receive what God has for us if our hands are full of what He is asking us to release. We cannot move forward if we're constantly looking back. We cannot step into the new if we're clinging to the old. When we let go, We are not losing, we are making space. Space for healing, space for restoration, space for divine connections and God-ordained relationships. Space for blessings far greater than what we tried to hold on to. And when we fully surrender, when we trust in God's pruning, when we release what was never meant to stay, we step into the freedom and abundance that only He can give. God is not a God of coincidence. He is a God of divine orchestration. Every relationship, every encounter, every person who enters and exits our lives is part of His greater plan. We may not always understand it in the moment, but nothing happens by accident. God knows who belongs in our lives and who does not. He knows who will help us grow, strengthen our faith, and walk alongside us in our purpose. And He knows who will hinder us, distract us, or pull us away from His will. That is why, in His perfect wisdom, He removes the wrong people to make space for the right ones. Sometimes we struggle to let go of certain relationships because we have invested time, energy, and love into them. We become attached, thinking that because someone has been in our lives for a long time, they are meant to stay forever. But longevity is not the measure of a God-ordained connection. Just because someone has been part of our journey does not mean they are meant to walk with us in every season. Some relationships are meant to teach us, some are meant to refine us, and some are only meant to last for a time. God in His love will often allow people to leave, not as a punishment, but as protection. He sees the conversations we do not hear. He knows the intentions of the heart. He understands what lies ahead. And when He removes someone, it is because He is making space for someone better suited for our journey. He is aligning us with people who will encourage our faith, push us closer to Him, and walk with us in purpose. We must trust the process. If God is closing a door, it is because He has something greater in store. If He is moving people out of our lives, it is because they are not part of what He is preparing for us. Too often we hold on to the familiar, afraid of the unknown. But what if the relationships we are clinging to are the very things keeping us from the blessings God has planned? What if our reluctance to let go is delaying the divine connections He wants to bring into our lives? When we surrender our relationships to God, He will begin to align us with the right people at the right time. He will introduce us to friendships that bring peace instead of confusion, mentors who speak wisdom into our lives, and partners who strengthen our faith instead of weakening it. Divine connections are not just about companionship, they are about purpose. God places people in our lives to sharpen us, to uplift us, to help us fulfill His calling. And when those connections come, we will realize why He had to remove the wrong ones. The people He brings will inspire us, pray for us, challenge us to grow, and remind us of His promises. They will walk with us in faith, standing beside us in difficult moments, and celebrating with us in times of joy. And as we look back, we will see that every removal, every goodbye, every closed door was not rejection. It was preparation. Preparation for something far greater than we could have ever imagined. We often struggle with letting go because we are afraid of what comes next. The past is familiar. It is what we know, what we are used to, and what feels safe. Even when we sense God calling us forward, we hesitate. We try to hold on to relationships, places, and seasons that He is asking us to release. But when we resist His will, we are not just delaying our progress. We are blocking the very blessings He is preparing for us. God's will is always for our good, even when it does not make sense in the moment. He sees what we cannot see, knows what we do not know, and understands what we cannot comprehend. When He removes something or someone from our lives, it is not to hurt us, but to position us for something better. Yet too often we fight against His plan. We cling to the past, hoping to make things work in our own strength. We hold on to people who have already walked away. We dwell on memories instead of embracing new beginnings. And in doing so, we keep ourselves stuck, unable to step into the new because we are too busy trying to resurrect what God has already called us to leave behind. The Israelites struggled with this very thing. After God delivered them from slavery in Egypt, they still longed for the place he had rescued them from. Even though Egypt was a land of bondage, it was also familiar. The wilderness, with all its uncertainty, felt uncomfortable. And so they looked back, yearning for what God had already declared was no longer part of their story. How often do we do the same? How often do we ask God for deliverance but resist when he begins to lead us into the unknown? God is the God of forward motion. He is always leading us into greater things, into deeper faith, into new levels of purpose. But if we keep looking backward, we will miss what he is trying to do in our lives. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" God is always working, always moving, always preparing us for something more. But we cannot receive the new if we are still clinging to the old. Holding on to the past will not change it. Wishing things had turned out differently will not make them so. Trying to force relationships that God has already released will only bring frustration and heartache. When we refuse to let go, we are not protecting ourselves. We are limiting ourselves. We are settling for less when God wants to give us more. Do not fight against his will. Do not resist the changes he is making in your life. Trust that if he is asking you to let go, it is because he is leading you toward something far greater. A new season is coming, one filled with his goodness, his favor, and his perfect plan. But to step into it, you must first be willing to release what was never meant to stay. Trusting in God's greater plan requires faith beyond what we can see, beyond what we can understand, and beyond what we feel in the moment. When God removes someone from our lives, it can be painful. We may not understand why a friendship ended, why a relationship fell apart, or why someone we cared about is no longer walking with us. But what we must remember is that God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. Isaiah 55:8-9. He sees what we cannot see. He knows what we do not know. And he is always working for our good, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. Every removal in our lives is not a loss. It is a step toward something better. When God closes a door, it is not to punish us, but to redirect us. When he takes someone out of our lives, it is not to leave us empty, but to make room for what he has prepared. We may not see it at first. We may grieve the relationships that ended or the people who walked away. But if we could see what God sees, we would understand that every shift, every change, and every removal is part of a greater plan, one that leads us into his perfect will. Think about the story of Joseph. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. From a human perspective, it seemed as though everything was going wrong. But in God's greater plan, every loss Joseph experienced was positioning him for something greater. If his brothers had not betrayed him, he would have never ended up in Egypt. If he had never been falsely accused, he would have never met the Pharaoh. If he had never been imprisoned, he would have never been elevated to a position of power. And when the time was right, when God's plan had come full circle, Joseph was not only reunited with his family, but he was placed in a position to save an entire nation. The same is true for us. What feels like rejection today may be God's protection. What looks like loss may be his preparation. We may not see it now, but if we trust in his timing, we will one day look back and realize that every removal, every closed door, and every goodbye was leading us to something far greater than we could have imagined. God is never early, and he is never late. His timing is perfect. We may feel like we are waiting, like we are in a season of uncertainty, but God is always at work behind the scenes. He is aligning the right people, the right opportunities, and the right blessings to come into our lives at just the right time. And when we finally step into that new season, we will understand why he had to remove what was no longer meant for us. So do not be discouraged when people walk away. Do not lose heart when relationships change. Instead, trust that God is leading you towards something better. Trust that his plan is far greater than anything you could ever arrange for yourself. Trust that every removal is not an end but a beginning, a step towards something beyond what you could ask, think, or imagine in his perfect timing. So when the road ahead seems uncertain, when people leave and doors close, do not look back with regret or question God's wisdom. Instead, lift your eyes to the one who holds your future in his hands. He is not finished with your story. He is making a way where there seems to be none. What you see as loss, God sees as preparation. What you feel as rejection, he calls redirection. And what you fear is the end, he declares is only the beginning. If you trust him, if you surrender to his perfect will, you will look back one day and understand that every removal was a step toward his greater plan. So, walk forward in faith, release what he is pruning, embrace what he is bringing, and know that his plans for you are good, his timing is perfect, and the best is yet to come.